There was an empty chair where my mother should have been. I can still see it. White lace tied around its back, sunlight catching the dust that floated through the old barn we'd turned into a wedding hall. Everyone said the day was perfect, but all I could see was that chair. I had spent most of my life trying to fill it, trying to earn her approval, her love, her silence. I didn't know which one hurt more when it was missing. They said my parents couldn't make it, but we both knew what that meant. They didn't approve, again. And yet somehow, I smiled through the ceremony, through the applause, through Gabriel's steady eyes locked on mine, as if he knew that behind every laugh I was holding my breath, waiting for a love that was never coming. When people talk about emotional healing, they make it sound like yoga and warm baths. But mine started right there, standing in front of an empty chair at my own wedding, realizing that the kind of love I had been begging for all my life was never love at all. It was control disguised as care. It was the silent punishment of a toxic family that taught me I was only worthy when I obeyed. The music started. Gabriel squeezed my hand. His thumb brushed over my palm, grounding me in a way I didn't know I needed. He said, "I've got you." And for a moment, I believed him. But later that night, when the guests were gone and the laughter had faded into the distant sound of crickets, I sat by the window of our honeymoon suite, still in my wedding dress, and cried. Not because my parents hadn't shown up, but because, for the first time, I finally understood what that meant. They weren't coming back. Not this time. Not ever. I remember sitting there, the last notes of the wedding song fading, and realizing sometimes love doesn't leave in a storm. It just quietly stops showing up. And if you've ever felt that kind of silence, you understand. Before I go on, I just want to take a moment because maybe you're listening to this story for a reason. If you've ever tried to heal from a toxic family, or if you've ever felt like love was something you had to earn, this space is for you. Take a second to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how many hearts around the world are healing together here. And if you're new, subscribe to Possible Hearts so you don't miss the next story, because sometimes hearing someone else's healing helps you find your own.
I grew up thinking that if I could just be better, prettier, quieter, smarter, thinner, maybe they'd stop finding reasons to be disappointed. My mother used to say, "Jessica, love isn't a right. It's something you earn." And I believed her. God, I believed her. I learned early that affection had conditions, that approval came with fear, that peace came only after apology. So I became the good daughter, the careful one, the one who swallowed her feelings like medicine and smiled through the ache. But standing there, staring at that empty chair, something inside me broke, quietly, almost mercifully. It wasn't the sharp pain of rejection this time. It was a calm understanding. Maybe the love I had been chasing my whole life was never real. Maybe it was time to stop running after ghosts. After the guests left, Gabriel found me outside. The air was cold, the kind that bites the skin just enough to remind you you're alive. The string lights overhead swayed in the wind, flickering like stars that couldn't decide if they wanted to stay. He sat beside me, his jacket draped over my shoulders. He didn't say a word for a long time. Finally, he asked softly, "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. There's nothing to say. But my voice cracked, betraying me. He nodded, as if he already knew the story I couldn't tell, the one I had carried for years, of Sunday dinners where silence was punishment, of birthdays that felt like exams, of hugs that ended in criticism. "I thought they'd come," I whispered. "I thought they'd surprise me." Gabriel exhaled, slow and steady. Maybe their absence is the surprise. I looked at him then, this man who didn't try to fix what he didn't understand, who didn't fill the silence with pity. His calm was a mirror to my chaos, and it terrified me, because in his eyes, I saw something I wasn't sure I deserved: unconditional love. That night while he slept, I wrote a letter I'd never send. Dear Mom, you were supposed to be here. You said love was something to earn, but I'm tired. I've spent 29 years trying to deserve it. And today I realized something. I don't want love that hurts. I don't want love that keeps score. I just want peace. Maybe that's the kind of love you never learned how to give, but I'll learn it for the both of us. I folded the letter, pressed it against my chest, and let myself fall asleep for the first time in years, without feeling like I owed anyone an apology. If you've ever tried to heal from a toxic family, you know it's not a clean process. It's messy, quiet, and often invisible. But standing there, in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. This is the day I stop trying to earn love. This is the day I start learning to give it to me. The next morning, I woke to Gabriel's voice and the smell of coffee. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "You ready to go home?" I smiled back, but inside, I knew home wasn't a place anymore. It was a question I didn't yet know how to answer. And that's where my real story begins.
They say every family has a sound. Some grow up with laughter echoing through the hallways. Mine had the sound of eggs cracking. It always happened the same way. Sunday morning, my mother's standing by the stove, her nails perfectly painted, her lips pressed into a line that meant she was already disappointed about something I hadn't done yet. She'd crack the eggs into the pan one by one, and every sound felt like a warning. Don't speak. Don't move. Don't mess up. "Jessica," she'd call without looking up, "did you iron your dress for church?" "Yes, Mom." "Properly this time?" "Yes, Mom." She'd sigh, long, deliberate, as if even my answers weren't quite right. Then she'd say it, the phrase that still lingers in my head like smoke. "Good. Don't embarrass us today." I was 8 the first time I realized that love in our house was conditional. It wasn't spoken outright. It was measured in size, in glances, in who got praised at the dinner table. My older brother Evan always did. He played baseball, he smiled right, he said the right things. Me? I was too sensitive, too quiet, too much in all the wrong ways. I used to think that if I could just be different, she'd love me the way she loved him. One night, when I was 10, I overheard her talking to my father in the kitchen. The lights were dim, but I could see the outline of their bodies through the frosted glass door. "She's too emotional," my mother said. "Everything's drama with that girl. She'll never survive in the real world if she keeps crying over every little thing." My father didn't answer right away. He never did. He just grunted, that heavy, tired sound that meant he agreed, or at least didn't care enough to disagree. I remember pressing my palms against the cold wood of the door, trying to breathe quietly and thinking, okay, no more tears, no more mistakes. Be what they want. Be good. That's how it starts. Childhood trauma doesn't always begin with bruises. Sometimes it begins with silence, with looks, with the feeling that your existence is too loud for the room you were born into. When I was 13, I learned about emotional boundaries the wrong way. It was a Tuesday. I'd stayed after school to help a teacher clean the art room because painting was the only place I didn't have to be perfect. I lost track of time and got home late. My mother was waiting at the kitchen counter, her face still beautiful in that cold, polished way that always made me feel small. "Where were you?" "I told you I was helping Ms. Rhodes." "Do you think I don't notice when you lie to me?" Her voice was low, calm, which was always worse than when she shouted. "Do you want to be like those girls who waste their lives on nonsense? You think art is going to feed you?" I remember her hand, not hitting, not even touching, just hovering in the air, like the threat of disappointment itself was enough to sting. "You apologize right now," she said. "For what?" I asked, my voice shaking. "For worrying me." That's when I understood what love that controls feels like. You apologize for things you didn't do to avoid pain you didn't cause.
As I got older, the walls of our house began to feel smaller. Every decision had to pass through her filter. Clothes, friends, grades, tone of voice. My father stayed on the sidelines, quiet as ever, disappearing behind his evening newspaper. And me? I became an expert at emotional camouflage. I learned how to smile on cue, how to anticipate her moods, how to disappear before the storm arrived. That's what kids in toxic families do. They become peacekeepers, even if it means losing themselves in the process. I remember one night when I was 17, sitting in my bedroom with the window cracked open. The air smelled like rain and cut grass, and somewhere down the street, someone was playing the piano. It was such a soft, hopeful sound that it almost made me cry. That's when I whispered to myself, one day, I'll build a life that doesn't hurt to wake up to. I didn't know how, I didn't know where, but I held on to that promise like a secret map. Fast forward 12 years. On my wedding night, when Gabriel held my hand and told me, "You don't have to earn my love," that map finally started to make sense. But healing from a toxic family isn't a straight line. It's not like you escape and everything's fine, because the voices follow you. You hear them when you make a mistake. You hear them when someone praises you. You even hear them when someone loves you, whispering, "They'll leave once they see the real you." That's what trauma does. It hides inside compliments, inside kindness, turning love into a test you're always afraid to fail. The next morning after my wedding, Gabriel suggested something that terrified me more than I expected. "Let's visit your hometown," he said gently. "Just for a few days. You can show me where you grew up." I froze. The thought of walking back into that house, the eggs, the sighs, the invisible bruises, made my stomach twist. But part of me wanted closure. Part of me wanted to see if I could stand there without breaking. So I said yes. I didn't know it then, but that trip would change everything. Because sometimes to finally find inner peace, you have to walk back through the door that once taught you to stay silent.
The road back to my hometown looked smaller than I remembered. The trees leaned over the cracked asphalt like they were whispering secrets I'd tried to forget. It had been almost 5 years since I'd last driven this way. 5 years since I'd promised myself I would never look back. Gabriel drove in silence, his hand resting lightly on the gear shift, close enough to touch mine if I reached out. He knew better than to fill the air with questions. He just let me breathe, and I loved him for that. As we passed the faded "Welcome to Cedar Hill" sign, my chest tightened. It wasn't nostalgia. It was something heavier, a quiet dread, like walking into a dream where everything looked familiar but wrong. We pulled into the old neighborhood. The houses looked tired, their lawns overgrown, paint peeling like forgotten promises. When we turned the corner, I saw it, the Dixon house. Pale blue siding, white shutters, the porch swing still there, hanging crooked. It was the kind of house people would call charming if they didn't know the stories it held. I stared at it through the windshield and whispered, "It still smells like rain in my head when I think of this place." Gabriel squeezed my hand. "We don't have to go in," but I shook my head. "I need to." The front gate creaked when I pushed it open. The grass brushed against my ankles, tall and unkempt. For a moment, I half expected my mother's voice to slice through the air. "Jessica, don't drag dirt onto the porch." But there was only the sound of wind and the faint chirp of cicadas. I knocked on the door,
even though I knew no one would answer. The house had been empty for months. My parents had moved out after my father's health declined. A neighbor had told me the new owners hadn't moved in yet. So technically, it wasn't anyone's home now, just a shell full of echoes. The door creaked open when I tried it. The smell hit me first. Dust, lemon cleaner, and something faintly floral, like the ghost of my mother's perfume. Chanel number 5. She wore it like armor. The living room looked exactly the same. The same floral couch, the same glass coffee table I'd once cracked when I tripped trying to dust it. I could still hear her voice that day. "Do you know how much that cost, Jessica? You never think before you act." My father had just looked up from his chair and muttered, "Leave it, Claire," before disappearing again behind his newspaper. It was strange how memories could live inside walls. I could almost feel them, like static in the air. Gabriel walked beside me quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of a picture frame on the wall. It was an old family photo. My mother's smile was tight and perfect. My father's arm around her looked rehearsed. And there I was, 7 years old, holding my brother's hand, smiling like I had been told to. That picture had hung in the same spot my entire childhood. We were the perfect family. At least that's what the frame said. Gabriel turned to me. "Do you want to talk about them?" I shook my head. You'd think after all this time I'd know how. But it's like every word I tried to say about them feels like betrayal. Maybe it's not betrayal. Maybe it's truth finally finding a voice. He had a way of saying things that made silence feel safe again.
In the kitchen, the clock above the stove was still ticking. I don't know why that bothered me so much. Maybe because time had moved on for everyone, except the girl I used to be. I ran my fingers along the countertop, feeling the faint grooves where my mother's wedding ring had scratched the surface over the years. She used to tap it against the granite whenever she was angry, a tiny metallic warning before the storm. As I stood there, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small wooden box tucked behind the stack of old cookbooks. It was covered in dust, tied shut with a faded ribbon. "Did you hide this?" Gabriel asked. I frowned. "No, I've never seen it." My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, folded neatly, some yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. The first one was dated 1993. I unfolded it carefully. "Dear Mom, I'm trying my best, I swear I am, but she cries all the time. She looks at me like I'm the enemy. Sometimes I think she hates me and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I just don't want to become you." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Gabriel touched my arm. "Jess?" I couldn't speak. My mother, the woman who weaponized perfection, had written this. About me? Or about her mother? I kept reading. "You always said children should fear their mothers, that it keeps them in line. But I'm so tired of being feared. I wanted her to love me. I just didn't know how to show it without breaking her first." The room spun slightly. I sat down on the cold kitchen floor and whispered, "She was writing to her own mother." Gabriel knelt beside me. He said quietly, "Breaking generational cycles. Sometimes it doesn't start with healing. It starts with awareness." I looked at him, tears burning behind my eyes. "So she was hurt too?" He nodded. "Maybe she never learned any other way." I thought about that for a long time. About the way pain gets passed down like family china, polished, disguised, but sharp at the edges. We left the house at sunset. As I turned to close the door, I noticed the light hitting the old photograph on the wall, our family smiling forever in a moment that never really existed. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt grief, and beneath it, something new, understanding. Because maybe forgiveness doesn't always come as a grand gesture. Sometimes it starts as a quiet recognition that the people who broke you were also broken once. As we drove away, Gabriel reached for my hand again. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I looked out the window at the fading sky and whispered to myself,
I'm done inheriting pain. It ends with me.
You'd think that finding those letters would have made me feel lighter, that understanding my mother's pain would somehow free me from mine. But it didn't. It made everything heavier, because now every cruel word, every cold stare, every moment of silence, I couldn't hate her for it anymore. And somehow that hurt even more than anger ever did. The ride home was quiet. Gabriel played soft music, something wordless and tender, but even that felt like too much. My mind was a storm of half-formed memories. The eggs cracking, the perfume, her sighs, and those words from the letter looping in my head. I wanted her to love me. I just didn't know how to show it without breaking her first. When we got home, I went straight to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, making my skin look pale, ghostly. For a long time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Was I her, my mother? Or was I the version she had wanted to become and couldn't? Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his voice gentle. "You okay?" I nodded too fast. "Yeah, just tired." But he didn't buy it. He never did. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You don't have to be fine, Jess." That's when I broke. The sobs came out of nowhere, deep, guttural, like something that had been buried for decades finally clawed its way to the surface. Gabriel caught me before I could slide to the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just held me while I came apart. I cried for the little girl who'd been told to sit still, for the teenager who apologized for breathing too loud, for the woman who'd mistaken anxiety for devotion. And somewhere in between the tears and the shaking, I whispered, "What if I end up like her?" Gabriel pulled back enough to look at me. "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're asking that question. People who destroy others never stop to wonder if they might." I wanted to believe him, I really did, but the fear didn't fade, because love, real, healthy love, still felt like something I could break just by touching it. The next few days blurred together. I went through the motions, work, chores, smiling when I needed to, but inside it was like walking through fog. Gabriel noticed. One evening, while we were eating dinner, he put down his fork and said quietly, "You've been somewhere else all week." I looked at him across the table, this man who had done nothing but love me patiently, gently, and I still couldn't meet his eyes. "I just need to figure things out," I murmured. "What things?" "I don't know. Maybe how to stop expecting people to leave." He reached for my hand. "Jess, I'm not them." I pulled away before I could stop myself. "I know, that's what scares me." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavy, sad. The kind of silence that makes two people realize they're standing on different sides of the same wound.
That night, I couldn't sleep. Gabriel was turned away from me, his breathing slow and steady. I watched the moonlight stretch across the bedroom floor, and for the first time, I wondered if I was the one holding on to my pain like a security blanket. Because as much as I hated what my family had done to me, their absence had become familiar. And sometimes, familiar feels safer than peace. I got out of bed and went to the balcony. The air was cold, sharp. I wrapped myself in a blanket and tried to slow my thoughts. That's when Gabriel's voice came from behind me. "Can't sleep again?" I shook my head. He sat beside me, our shoulders touching. "Talk to me," he said softly, "even if it's messy, especially if it's messy." I stared at the night sky for a long time before I answered. I keep thinking about those letters, about how my mom must have felt. Trapped, angry, scared. I understand her now, and I hate that I do. That's not hate, Jess. That's empathy. It's the sign you're healing. But I don't feel healed. I feel broken in a different way. Maybe healing is breaking, just in the right direction this time. And looked at him, and there it was again. That quiet steadiness that both comforted and frightened me. "Gabriel, what if I don't know how to love right?" He smiled gently. "Then we'll learn together.
Love isn't something you perform, it's something you practice. His words sank in slowly, like warm water seeping into cold skin. For the first time in days, I let myself exhale. A week later, I found myself standing in front of the old piano in our living room, a wedding gift from Gabriel's father. I lifted the cover and pressed a single key. The note hung in the air, trembling. It sounded like grief and hope at once. That's when I realized something. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about not letting it decide who you become. I sat there for a long time, pressing keys softly, one by one, until the house was full of imperfect music. Gabriel came in quietly and leaned against the doorway watching. He didn't interrupt. He just smiled. And in that silence, something inside me finally settled. Still, the fear lingered, small but stubborn. Could love really survive when one heart was still learning what safety meant? Could someone like me, who grew up walking on eggshells, ever stop waiting for the crack? I didn't have the answer then, but soon something would happen that would force me to find it. Because sometimes love tests you not through conflict, but through life itself, in the moments that change everything.
I used to think love was tested in arguments, the big dramatic moments where someone slams a door and someone else runs after them. But I was wrong. Love is tested in whispers, in silence, in how you hold someone when life suddenly stops making sense. It happened on a Tuesday, a normal Tuesday, the kind that disappears in the middle of the week until it doesn't. Gabriel and I were driving home from the grocery store. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and lavender streaks. The radio was playing an old Fleetwood Mac song, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. Then, out of nowhere, a car ran the red light. I heard the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and then nothing. Just blackness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. The air smelled like antiseptic and fear. My head throbbed, my arm was in a sling, and there was a dull ache that seemed to live somewhere deep in my bones. Gabriel was sitting beside the bed, his eyes red from crying. When he saw me stir, he stood up so fast the chair clattered to the floor. "Jess, thank God, you're okay." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. What happened?" He brushed a tear from my cheek. "You were unconscious for almost 4 hours. They said it was a mild concussion, nothing permanent." I swallowed hard. "And you?" He smiled weakly. "Bruised ribs, that's all. The car's totaled, but we're alive." Alive? That word suddenly felt fragile, holy, undeserved. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but something inside me cracked open, not physically, emotionally, because the moment I realized I could have lost him, every buried fear came rushing back. The fear of abandonment, the fear of being left behind, the fear that maybe love was something temporary after all. Over the next few days, Gabriel stayed by my side. He helped me eat, walk, shower. He even brushed my hair gently, laughing when I grumbled about how tangled it had become. He never once complained, and that somehow made it worse, because I didn't know how to receive love without owing something in return. One night, I woke to find him asleep in the hospital chair, his hand still holding mine. His face looked softer in sleep, boyish almost, and my chest ached with love so deep it terrified me. That's when the thought hit me. What if he's better off without me? The voice was familiar, one I hadn't heard in a while. My mother's voice, smooth and cruel. "You're too much trouble, Jessica. People leave girls like you." I tried to shake it off, but it stayed. And by the time I was discharged, the fear had already taken root. A week later, we were back home. Gabriel cooked dinner, lit candles, trying to make life feel normal again.
But normal felt far away. Every time he looked at me with that worried tenderness, guilt stabbed through me. At one point, he reached across the table, his thumb brushing my wrist. "You're quiet tonight," he said softly. "I'm fine," I lied. "Jess?" I looked up. His eyes were full of something that looked like pain. "You keep pulling away. Did I do something wrong?" "No," I whispered. "You didn't." "Then what is it?" I hesitated. I don't want you to get tired of me." His brow furrowed. "Tired of you?" "Yeah, of this. Of me always trying to heal, always breaking." For a long time, he said nothing. Then he pushed his plate aside, stood, and came around to kneel beside me. "Jess, look at me." I did, reluctantly. He didn't fall in love with a version of you that never hurts. He fell in love with the woman who keeps getting back up. You don't have to be healed to be loved. The tears came fast and hot. "I don't know how to believe that." "Then let me show you until you do." That night, he held me tighter than he ever had before. No words, no promises, just the sound of two hearts that had been through hell and still found a rhythm together. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. I felt safe. That word, safe, tasted strange on my tongue, like something new I wasn't sure I deserved yet. But deep down, I knew this was the real test of love. Not surviving the crash, but surviving the fear that followed. Weeks passed. My bruises faded, my body healed, but my mind was still tender. I started therapy, something Gabriel had gently suggested for months. There, I began learning what self-love really meant. Not comfort baths or mantras, but forgiveness. Forgiveness for the girl who didn't know better. Forgiveness for the woman who still flinched when loved too gently. One afternoon, as I was leaving therapy, Gabriel called. His voice was bright, nervous even. "Hey, don't make plans tonight, okay? I have something to tell you." He sounded different, hopeful, excited, and that scared me because part of me still believed that happiness was a setup, that good news always came with a catch. I tried to smile through the phone. "Okay, I'll be home soon." But as I hung up, my hands trembled because deep down, I already knew life was about to change again, and this time in ways I wasn't ready for.
When I walked through the front door that night, I knew something was different. The air felt charged. Not heavy, not tense, just full, like the pause before a song begins. Gabriel was in the kitchen, pacing a little, his hands buried in its pockets. "Hey," I said carefully, hanging my coat. "You sound like you swallowed a secret." He turned, and there it was, that soft, nervous smile I'd only seen once before, the night he proposed. "I have something to tell you, but you might want to sit down first." I frowned. "You're scaring me." "It's not bad. At least, I don't think it is." My heart thudded. "Then what is it?" He took a deep breath. "Jess, you remember a few weeks ago when you weren't feeling well? The nausea, the fatigue?" I blinked, confused. "Yeah, I thought it was just stress." He smiled, his eyes glimmering with tears he didn't hide. "It's not stress. I picked up your test results." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Jess, you're pregnant." For a moment, the world stopped. No sound, no air, just the wild thumping of my heart. Too fast, too loud. Pregnant. The word felt foreign in my mouth, heavy with a meaning I couldn't quite touch. I sat down slowly, staring at the floor as if it might tell me what to feel. Joy? Terror? Both? Gabriel knelt in front of me. "Say something," he whispered. I don't know what to say." He laughed softly, nervous. "That's okay. I didn't either when I found out. I thought you should know first." "First?" I echoed. He nodded.
Before the world finds out, before your fears do. I couldn't stop shaking. My hands trembled as I touched my stomach. Still flat, still mine, for now. Are you serious? He wouldn't joke about something like this. I met his eyes then. Those calm, steady eyes that had seen me through every breakdown, every silence. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe because all I could think about was my mother, her size, her rules, her perfection. The way she had looked at me like I was a mirror she wanted to break. What if I become her? I whispered. Gabriel's face softened. You won't. You don't know that. He said, I know you, and that's enough. But it wasn't enough for me. Not yet. That night, after he fell asleep, I went out to the backyard. The air was cold, the grass damp with dew. The stars hung low and sharp, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked, a sound that somehow made everything feel real again. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered to the dark, I can't do this. But even as I said it, I felt something stir inside me, not physically, but emotionally, a flicker of something ancient, protective, wild. I closed my eyes and remembered the letters in that wooden box, my mother's handwriting, her fear, her confession. I wanted her to love me. I just didn't know how to show it without breaking her first. And for the first time, I understood her completely, because standing there with life quietly beginning inside me, I felt it, the terrifying weight of love, the kind that makes you afraid to breathe wrong in case you break what's fragile and new. I pressed my hand against my belly and whispered, I'll do better. I don't know how yet, but I will.
Over the next few weeks, everything changed, and nothing did. Gabriel was glowing, already looking up nursery ideas, talking about names, laughing in a way that filled the house with sunlight. And me? I tried to catch up to his joy. But healing isn't linear, and happiness can be just as scary as pain when you've spent your whole life bracing for loss. Every ultrasound appointment felt like a test. Every heartbeat we heard, strong, rhythmic, alive, brought both relief and fear. I remember the first time I saw the tiny flicker on the screen. The doctor smiled. There's your baby. Gabriel squeezed my hand, and I cried, quietly, shaking, overwhelmed, because that flicker wasn't just a heartbeat. It was proof that something good could come from me, something pure. That night, I told Gabriel, I'm scared I'll mess this up. He smiled gently. You will. We both will. But we'll love her through it. That's when I realized he didn't see love as perfection. He saw it as persistence. Months passed. My belly grew, our house changed, our laughter returned. One evening, as I sat by the window, I felt it. The first kick. A soft flutter, like a secret tap from inside. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Gabriel, he came running. What's wrong? I grabbed his hand and pressed it to my belly. Wait. There it was again, a tiny thump. He gasped, eyes wide, and for a moment he just laughed. He said, That's her. She's saying hi. I laughed too, through tears. But somewhere deep inside, I felt something shift. That old emptiness, the hollow space my mother's love never filled, it started to close. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd finally learned what unconditional love feels like. And this time, it came from the inside out. Later that night, as I lay awake, listening to Gabriel breathe beside me, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The empty chair, the letters, the accident, the fear. And I realized something so simple, it almost felt sacred. Healing isn't about fixing the past. It's about rewriting the future. I placed my hand over my heart, then over my belly, and whispered, maybe this is what forgiveness feels like. A heartbeat I almost missed. The night Leela was born, the sky outside our hospital window was painted in soft shades of dawn, pale pinks, golds, and a touch of gray. It felt poetic somehow, a new day arriving while the old one,
quietly faded away. The delivery was long, messy, and louder than I'd expected. There was no cinematic calm, no perfect soundtrack, just sweat, pain, and Gabriel's voice steadying me through it all. "Breathe, Jess. You've got this. Look at me." His eyes, warm, unwavering, were the anchor that kept me from drifting into panic. And then, at 5:27 a.m., she arrived. Tiny, wrinkled, wailing like the world owed her an explanation. The nurse laid her on my chest, and I swear the entire room went silent. I stared at her impossibly small fingers curling around mine, and something inside me broke open, but not in pain this time, in wonder. For a few seconds, I couldn't even cry. I just breathed her in, that newborn scent of milk and warmth and new beginnings. Gabriel was crying, though he tried to hide it. He said, "She's perfect." I smiled weakly. I said, "She's loud." And he said, "She gets that from you." And I laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, tiny socks, and tears that had nothing to do with sadness. Every time Leela cried, I panicked, afraid I was doing something wrong. Every time she smiled, I melted, afraid it wouldn't last. Motherhood was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever done. But amid the chaos, something sacred began to bloom inside me. I started to understand that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. When I held her, the world made sense. The noise in my head, my mother's voice, my doubts, my guilt grew quieter. Every time Leela laughed, I felt another piece of my past fade away. 3 months after Leela's birth, I was sitting by the window, nursing her while the morning lights spilled across the living room floor. Gabriel was in the kitchen, humming as he made coffee. It was peaceful, finally, beautifully peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but something in me, curiosity, instinct, fate, made me pick it up. It was a message from my mother. "Hi, Jessica. I heard from Aunt Marie that you had a baby. I hope she's healthy. I'd like to see her sometime, if that's possible." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. 3 sentences. No apology, no acknowledgement of years of silence. Just that. Polite, careful, distant. Gabriel came over quietly, reading the message over my shoulder. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" I looked down at Leela, her tiny hand resting on my chest, her breath warm against my skin. What did I want? To scream? To forgive? To forget? All I felt was tired. Not angry, just tired of carrying the weight of someone else's brokenness. That night, after Leela was asleep, I opened my journal and began to write. Not to her, not to my mother, but to myself. "Dear Jessica, you've spent your whole life waiting for an apology that may never come. You don't need it anymore. You've already healed in ways she never could. Forgiveness isn't something you give to others. It's something you give to your own soul when you're ready to stop bleeding. Let go. You're free." When I finished, I didn't cry. I just felt light, like every invisible chain that had ever pulled me backward had quietly fallen away. Then I opened my messages again, and this time I typed a reply. "Hi, Mom. Thank you. She's doing really well. Her name is Leela. She laughs a lot, the kind of laugh that fills the whole room. I hope you're okay. Take care." I didn't send an invitation. I didn't offer explanations. Just peace. Silent, dignified peace. Gabriel looked at me as I hit send. He said, "That was brave." I smiled. No, that was closure. The next morning, as the sunlight spilled into the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched Leela playing on her blanket.
She was holding a stuffed bunny, babbling at it like they were having the most important conversation in the world. I sat beside her and whispered, "I promise, your laughter will never sound like an apology." She looked up at me with those bright, curious eyes, Gabriel's eyes, and smiled. And in that moment, I knew I had kept my promise. Because this quiet, ordinary morning was everything I'd ever wanted. A home where love didn't have to be earned. A life that didn't hurt to wake up to. A peace that came from within. Later that night, Gabriel and I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. He turned to me and said, "You know what today is?" I frowned. "Friday?" He chuckled. "Our anniversary. 1 year since we got married." I smiled. "Oh my God, how did I forget?" He chuckled. "Maybe because we've been busy creating life." He reached for my hand. "I know we said I do last year, but tonight, can I say it again?" I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I do. To choosing peace with you every day. To building love that's gentle, even when life isn't. To being the kind of home neither of us ever had growing up." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I whispered back, "I do too." We sat there in silence, the sound of Leela's faint giggles drifting through the open window. And for the first time, the word forever didn't feel like a trap. It felt like freedom.
It's been 5 years since that morning on the porch. 5 years since I said I do for the second time, not to Gabriel, but to myself, to peace, to softness, to a life I didn't have to keep surviving. Sometimes I still think about that empty chair at my wedding. For a long time, it symbolized everything I'd lost, everything I thought I needed to be whole. But now, when I close my eyes and picture it, I don't see emptiness anymore. I see space, room for growth, room for peace to sit down and stay a while. Our home today is nothing extravagant, just a cozy white house with ivy on the fence and laughter in the walls. Leela's 5 now, with Gabriel's smile and my stubbornness. She runs through the living room in her mismatched socks, humming the same little tune she hums every morning. She stops by the window, presses her tiny palms against the glass and says, "Look, Mommy, it's raining." I smile. "I see it, sweetheart." She twirls, giggling, her curls bouncing with every spin. And just like that, I remember another rainy morning, a long time ago, when I stood in that old kitchen, listening to the sound of eggs cracking and promising myself that one day I'd build a life that didn't hurt to wake up to. I did. Gabriel comes up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist. "He's got your spirit," he whispers. "God help us," I tease. He laughs softly. "You say that like it's a bad thing." He rests his chin on my shoulder, watching Leela dance in the rain. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come." I nod. "Me neither." Because the truth is, healing doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, like sunlight sneaking through the blinds after years of darkness. You just wake up one morning and realize you're okay. Maybe not perfect, maybe not complete, but okay. And okay feels like a miracle when you've lived in survival mode your whole life.
Later that day, I find a small envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Just my name, Jessica Wright, written in neat, familiar handwriting. For a moment, I freeze. I know that handwriting. Inside is a single note. I saw the pictures Aunt Marie sent. Lila looks happy. I hope you are too. I'm sorry, Jessica, for the years I couldn't be what you needed. Love, Mom. I sit on the porch steps, the letter trembling in my hands. The words aren't perfect. The apology comes decades late. But still, it's there. And strangely, I don't cry. Because forgiveness already found me, years ago, in the quiet moments when I chose not to become her. This letter isn't closure. It's confirmation. Proof that breaking the cycle changes more than just your own life. It echoes backward, too. Maybe healing doesn't erase pain. Maybe it rewrites it. That night, after putting Lila to bed,
I sit by the window with a cup of tea and my journal. I flip to the last page and write, I used to think healing meant fixing the past. Now I know it means choosing peace every single day. It's not about proving you're worthy of love. It's about realizing you always were. I close the journal, watching the steam curl from the mug, and I feel it again. That stillness I once thought I'd never find. Peace of mind. Inner peace. Whatever you call it, it's the most precious thing I've ever owned. Before bed, Gabriel joins me by the window. We stand in silence, looking out at the garden where Lila's fireflies flicker in the night. She's lucky, he says softly. She'll grow up knowing what love feels like. I nod. She already does. And then, after a long pause, I whisper something I never thought I'd say. I forgive her. Gabriel looks at me gently. Your mom? I nod again. Not because she asked, but because I don't need her to anymore. He pulls me close, his lips brushing the top of my head, and I know, right there in his arms, that this ordinary, peaceful moment is everything I used to beg the world for. The next morning, Lila runs into our room carrying a drawing. It's us, 3 stick figures holding hands, surrounded by a giant, uneven heart. At the top, in wobbly letters, she's written, Home equals love. I laugh through tears because she's right. Home isn't the place you come from. It's the one you build, day by day, choice by choice, out of kindness, patience, and forgiveness. And as I hang her drawing on the fridge, I whisper, this is what peace feels like. Quiet, steady, mine. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about reopening old doors. It's about locking them gently with love and walking toward the life you were always meant to build. Because the day I stopped trying to earn love was the day I finally understood what it truly was. And it was waiting all along inside of me. Well, if today's story touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Possible Hearts, and share it with someone who needs to remember, peace starts within.